Hey folks, this is my first video with audio. As if you've been watching my channel, you would have seen I've been posting videos about this app and this code that I've been working on called Software Management Tooling. This is my code base on Github, and I wanted to share with you an experiment I was doing this weekend. I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a visual story of my code base, to look at how the code base has evolved over time, and to be able to visualize the Git history and the Git commits. So I had some fun yesterday building this thing out with anti-gravity, and I just want to show you what it can do. And it might be of use to other people who have similar GitHub repositories, and for the lack of insights and metrics coming out of GitHub, you wanted to understand and tell a story about your code base. So here's my GitHub repo. You can see it's arranged here. And I built this little app called the Git Storyline, looking at some key metrics for the history of this Git code base. So 714 commits over 7 months, 104,000 lines of code added. How many files? 283 files created. On the left hand side is like a milestones roadmap from the first commit to where we are today. So this is a little, tells its own story in terms of milestones. You can see you can start with Genesis, started with a single commit, a readme file, and an index.html. This is when I started experimenting with AI. I wanted to see if I can turn this idea I had in my head around a software planning tool that starts with visualizing and speccing out the system architecture and working backwards from the architecture to drive a product roadmap and a project plan. If you see some of my videos over time, I've been iterating through this for a number of months. Not actively. I tried to follow the path of the models that were being released, and so my development was done in spurts. And I wanted to understand, okay, over the last year, how active was I with building this pet project of mine? So yeah, so the story is here. This is a little timeline of the major milestones, and basically you just click through and you'll get some information on, the key events that took place with this repository. You can see over here I introduced AI features in chapter 6, 114 commits, 2.6 thousand lines of added, 18 files changed. I've introduced the workspace layout. I upgraded the entire look and feel to a more modern enterprise look and feel. I added theme stylings, dark mode, and seasonal themes. This was a turning point in this code base because I built this using AI coding agents, and this was like the pivotal turning point that improved my experience tremendously with switching between multiple coding agents by enforcing a contract or a constitution for the code base. This is where I introduced formal coding contracts, agent coding rules, and the overall architecture for this application, so that any coding agent needing context about the code base would be able to find it and adhere to the rules. And then I went all in on the service layer architecture, refactoring into discrete services and really cleaning up the app. And then I spent some time paying down the technical debt using Codex mostly to get to 100% compliance. And then more recently, last week, I spent time improving the quality, adding static analysis, adding unit tests, adding end-to-end integration tests using Cypress, and so forth. And now, where it stands as of today, this code base is quite realistic and I would say an industry level sort of mature code base pattern now that any modern or industrial software engineering teams can respect. So I started off as just 2 lines, 2 files, README file and index file, eventually transformed into this massive code base of 283 files. And I said, let me play with some visualizations and look at the timelines. So over here you can see I have timeline views, and I'll just play the animations for you to see because it just looks cool. So I've got the milestones as a timeline horizontally. I've got swim lanes for the kind of work that I've implemented. There were features, refactoring architecture and services, introducing AI features, focusing on quality and infrastructure, and then a bunch of other stuff. So this is like a cool timeline. So let me play this for you. So if you just play it, and you'll be able to see the kind of work, right, that happened over time. And you could do this, I think, from not only is it cool, but it also tells a nice story, a narrative around the code base's evolution. And this might be useful for software developers, software managers to understand what's going on, what's the activity on the code base and the repository, and what areas were active at a certain point in time. So you can see this graph, it's a little animation, you can click on it and you can see actually what happened, what were the commits, and so forth. So that's one view. So this is a per commit view. There's a real-time view of what happened over time. Just move the slider, press play, and basically something similar, showing what's happening over time, the months of the year. You can see that from initially introducing this code in around October, November, really didn't do much because I wasn't too impressed with the coding agents at the time. I also could not afford to use Claude. I'm a paying subscriber for ChatGPT Plus and Gemini Pro, and I just couldn't afford another subscription. So in this period of time, when I started this initial idea, I was prompting Gemini and ChatGPT, copying and pasting the code, following its instructions, and building the app like that. And over time, I really just got tired and wasn't impressed. I had a lot of battles with those platforms. And then I woke up again around April, May. That's when I started having some time because I left my full-time employment and I had some time during my sabbatical, and I started playing again. And then I just switched off and said, okay, I'll wait until the models improve. And then you can see a burst of activity around November and December when Gemini 3 was launched, Claude 4.5, and then also, which I think is really cool, is Google's anti-gravity, which has really improved my productivity exponentially. So what's this other one? Milestone focus. Let's see what that one is about. I'm just don't really test it. Okay, so it's a similar view. Basically showing this timeline and the activities that happen in the code base. This is another view of activity that's showing how active the code base was around the different months of the year. And I overlaid that with the releases of the models, from Claude, Gemini, OpenAI, GPT-5, and so forth. So you can see that, okay, I wasn't really active. I was just playing around, experimenting, building out these features. And then, boom, November and December, really exponential growth. Lots of things happening with Gemini and anti-gravity. November 216, 298 in December, That's like, look at that increase. It's a crazy increase. That's like 5x increase. And then if you're really curious about how your engineers are changing, the files, what are the most active files, how is the repository changing over time, this view is quite cool. It's a file evolution view, so you can check, okay, most active files, the active files, and then also there's some graveyard files. So how did the code base evolve over time with files being deleted and so forth. If you've seen my other video, I showed a nice race animation of how the file sizes increased, and the top 50 files and the growth in the code base. So just look at this. If I click on index.html, okay, main, so you can look over here. This is how main.js started, and then increased, and then over refactoring how it decreased. Index.html as well was the first single file application. It grew, then cut down drastically as I refactored, and then my most recent refactor is index.html is just like a hashtag include file, referencing all the dependencies that the app needs. So yeah, so you can really look at all your files in the code base and see how active the files are over time. So here's an idea. So let's look at the ones that were deleted. Let's look at, okay, Gantt planning, for example. So Gantt planning is the Gantt chart feature of my application. It was pretty busy until I decided to really refactor into model view controller, and boom, I deleted the file. So a code base really goes through many phases. It evolves over time. You add files, you delete files, you refactor, and so forth. So I think this is pretty cool if you really wanted to do a deep dive, understand what's happening with your code base and how it evolved over time. Now for the interesting part. I'm a fan of animations and I'm a fan of visualizations. So here's a visualization of how the code base kind of evolved. So starting in the beginning, what were the files? And this is the overall layout of the repository and the files. So this is a really cool diagram. What's even cooler is this animation. Check this out. So again, I wanted to try to visualize how the code base grew over time, and created this cool SVG simulation. If you missed it, let me play it again for you. You can see how the files are being added, and over time increases the code base. So this is just one view. This is a classic tree view, and then I'm like, okay, what other views might be cool? So this spiral galaxy view I think is really cool, this radial chart. So you can see, you can started off at root and how it evolved, all the JavaScript files, how it's organized into services and so forth. And what's even cooler is, boom, this animation. As you can tell, I'm actually I quite enjoy visualizations, and I think this is really cool and satisfying to look at. How much did I write of this? Absolutely nothing. I just instructed and prompted the agent using the anti-gravity IDE, and this is the result. This is something that's quite complex, quite complicated, For a human to build this in like 20 minutes is probably impossible, and this is what Gemini produced in under 20 minutes, and it worked one shot for the radial view. It took me quite a few iterations to get the classic tree going. This is also quite complex to implement, using the node tree and using the D3 library to draw this. So I must say this is really cool. Let me see if I can find another one. Let me see, which one was that? The race view. If you haven't seen that video, let me see if I can find, what did I call it? Race. Codebase evolution race. Right. Check this out. So another visualization. I have another video on this, but it was a silent video. So let me just talk over it. This is the first time I'm using audio on my YouTube, and it's early in the morning, Cape Town, South Africa time. So I really like these visualizations that show how these charts are taking over one another. There was this famous visualization chart with the top companies by market cap over the last 30 years, and I looked at it and I'm like, I wonder if I can create something for my repository and look at how my files have evolved over time, and which is the most active file, the longest file in terms of lines of code. And yeah, with the help of Gemini anti-gravity, created this. So check this out. So you can see I started it in the code base, started with index.html. It started growing and growing. It was just single file. Here me just using Gemini and Claude and just copying and pasting and prompting. I have a Google Docs with about 100 pages of prompt history to build out this app. And so you can see, okay, and now this is how it's been evolving as I started breaking down the monolith, going back into more manageable code base, using files and so forth for discrete features, and adding new features over time, and how the files grew. And I find this also quite satisfying to watch. What you can see over here is the timeline, what's happening, and there was supposed to be some milestones being added over here. Oh, there we go, the AI integration. There's an in memoriam pop-up as well to say, okay, this is the point I started removing files from the code base. So it pops off the architecture, the milestones, workspace layout. So how did I do this? Was basically, Gemini has access to my GitHub repo. They have full access to executing Git commands. So go and look at the Git history, look at every commit, get all the metadata from the commits, understand the milestones, and then get all the data, process the data, convert it into JSON. So there's a Python script that was run in the background and gathered all the data into JSON, and then with that data set we were able to generate as many visualizations and insights and metrics that we can. I think this is really cool. And then also I found this also pretty cool, just an in memoriam section for all the files that helped me along the way building this app. And then in the end I decided to cut and deprecate, kill, simplify, and remove all those files. So yeah, so this is a way to visualize a code base. It's specific to my app at the moment, in my code base. You can find the code on my GitHub, and you can reuse it. It can be ported to become quite generic for any type of GitHub repository. And that's the end of the video.